This is how Álvaro Arbeloa made Real Madrid unplayable again. Not with a revolution, but with something far simpler: clarity. Because the pressure Madrid were feeling wasn't just tactical, it was cultural. A poor run of form had dropped them into the Champions League playoff round, a position this club is rarely comfortable in. But look at them now. 5 straight La Liga victories, a 1-0 win away at Benfica in the playoff first leg, in a match halted for 11 chaotic minutes, where Madrid didn't just survive the storm, they controlled it. And a team that suddenly feels alive again, yet just weeks ago? This same team felt unstable. Second in the league, yes, but the rhythm was missing. Kylian Mbappé producing, but often in isolation. Vinícius Jr. dangerous, yet restricted in his zones. Trent Alexander-Arnold's integration publicly questioned, and a structure that kept oscillating between control and chaos, never committing to either. Then Arbeloa stepped in. He restored Federico Valverde to midfield balance. He clarified Trent's role, not a defensive risk, but a tempo accelerator. He brought Vinícius and Mbappé closer in attacking corridors, and he compressed the space between Madrid's lines so counters stopped becoming crises. Now they attack faster, defend calmer, transition cleaner, and most importantly, they look synchronized. This isn't a bounce. The patterns are repeatable. The emotional temperature is stable. So how did an internal promotion, mid-season, transform a team slipping into playoff territory into one of Europe's most dangerous units again? This is exactly how Arbeloa stabilized Real Madrid, and why this version might be far more dangerous than the one that started the season. Real Madrid didn't fall apart in the table. They fell apart in rhythm. When Xabi Alonso departed in mid-January 2026, Madrid were still second in La Liga, within touching distance of the top. On paper, that doesn't look like crisis. At most clubs, that buys patience. At Real Madrid, it raises suspicion, because week to week the team felt unstable. One match they controlled possession and territory. The next, they looked stretched and reactive, leaning on individual brilliance to escape pressure. It was an oscillation between control and chaos, and no one was quite sure which version would show up. The Spanish Super Cup final defeat to Barcelona became the symbolic pressure point. It wasn't just the loss, it was the feeling. Madrid looked like a collection of elite players rather than a synchronized unit. In a one-off final, that contrast becomes magnified. Then there were the integration questions. Trent Alexander-Arnold arrived with elite pedigree, but his role felt fluid, sometimes wide distributor, sometimes inverted presence, sometimes exposed in transition. When the right side lacks clarity, it affects spacing across the entire pitch. Kylian Mbappé was producing numbers, goals, decisive actions, but the structure around him often looked fragmented. He was dangerous, but not always connected to the collective rhythm. Even Alonso publicly addressed rumors of unrest during a difficult stretch, insisting the dressing room was solid. That matters. At Madrid, reassurance is rarely offered unless noise has reached the inner circle. The problem wasn't points, it was identity. Madrid didn't know whether they were a suffocating control side or a vertical transition machine. And when a club, built on instinct and momentum, starts doubting its own profile, tension spreads quickly. So Madrid didn't look outward, they looked inward. On January 12, 2026, Real Madrid appointed Álvaro Arbeloa as first-team coach, an internal promotion from within the club structure. No external savior, no headline appointment, just a Madrid man. Arbeloa made 238 competitive appearances for the club between 2009 and 2016. He was part of the squad that delivered La Decima, the long-awaited 10th Champions League title, and experienced the club's modern pressure cycles from the inside. That institutional memory matters. At Real Madrid, authority isn't just tactical, it's cultural. The dressing room has to believe the coach understands what this environment does to players, how quickly momentum can turn, how heavy the Bernabeu can feel, how thin the margin is between applause and scrutiny. Arbeloa didn't need orientation. He needed alignment. And that's what he prioritized. Before systems, before patterns. He restored role clarity, he simplified instructions. Federico Valverde returned to midfield stability. Responsibilities became defined. Communication sharpened. The shift wasn't dramatic. It was structural. Before tactics, he restored clarity. And once clarity returned, the football changed quickly. Here's the thing about Arbeloa's Madrid. He didn't invent something new. He didn't arrive with a revolutionary system or a foreign philosophy. What he did was actually harder. He looked at a squad full of world-class players who had stopped functioning as a unit, and he simplified them back to themselves. Same players, clearer roles, and suddenly, the football makes sense again. On paper, Madrid line up in something close to a 4-3-3 or a 4-1-4-1. Stable back four, a midfield built to lock transitions. Forwards, positioned to attack space early, not wait around for perfect possession. But the formation label isn't the story. The story is what changed inside the shape, who accelerates play, who protects the counter, and where the stars actually receive the ball. That's where Arbeloa made his changes. And they weren't complicated. They were just right. This one feels obvious in hindsight. But that's exactly the point. Valverde in midfield is the switch that makes Madrid functional in both directions at once. Going forward, he's the engine, constantly available, receiving, carrying, recycling. He keeps the tempo alive without needing the ball to slow down. But going backwards, he's the emergency brake. When Madrid commit men forward, when Trent steps high, when Vinícius and Mbappé push, Valverde is the player who closes the half space before it turns into a sprint race the other way. You saw it most clearly in the Monaco 6-1. Madrid were pouring forward in waves, and yet they never looked stretched. Valverde's movement in that game isn't always the highlight, but it's always the reason the highlights are possible. The debate around Trent Alexander-Arnold at Madrid was never really about quality. Nobody questioned whether he was elite. The question was simpler and more uncomfortable. What exactly is he in this system? Under Arbeloa, that question got answered. Trent is the tempo accelerator. He switches play earlier, he delivers line-breaking passes earlier. He gives Madrid access to the front line before the opposition has time to reset its shape. And crucially, the structure around him finally protects that role. When Trent steps high, Valverde covers the right half space behind him. So Trent can be aggressive, can take risks in delivery, without every mistake turning into an open counter lane for the opponent. The proof came on February 14th against Real Sociedad, Trent's first start since December, and within 5 minutes he'd already delivered the cross for the opening goal. One pattern, one early action, instant payoff. That's what role clarity looks like in practice. This one is subtle, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. For a long stretch, under Alonso, Madrid's two most dangerous attackers were essentially operating on separate islands. Mbappé doing his own thing on one side, Vinícius stuck wide on the other, forced to beat two men from a standing start because the ball was arriving too late and too predictably. Arbeloa changed the entry point, not just the positioning. Madrid now find the front line faster. The ball gets vertical earlier, which means defenders are turning sooner, recovering under more pressure, and Vinícius is receiving in motion rather than in isolation. Meanwhile, Mbappé is being pointed at the half-space channel, the gap between the fullback and center-back, which is where he's genuinely unplayable. You saw the blend in Monaco. Mbappé scored twice, Vinícius added a goal and 2 assists. But what made it feel different wasn't the individual moments, it was the repetition. They kept accessing the same dangerous zones. That's not random brilliance. That's a system giving stars the right entry points. Over and over again. Call it what you want, the name doesn't matter, the behavior does. Madrid play up into a forward or advanced midfielder to attract pressure, then back. One line, pull the opponent out of shape, then through, hit the third man or switch to the far side before the block can reset. This is how they've stopped getting trapped in slow, sideways possession. It's not about passing more. It's about passing with purpose. Bait the press, then punch through it. And the timing matters. Breaking pressure earlier creates earlier 1v1s for Vinícius. It creates earlier channel runs for Mbappé. The whole attack flows faster because the trigger comes sooner. This part doesn't get talked about enough, but it might be the most important change of all. Madrid look calmer defensively, not because they're sitting deeper or being cautious, but because they compress faster after losing the ball. The distances between their lines are shorter. Counters become messy before they build momentum. Defensive actions happen earlier, in the middle of the pitch, not at the edge of the box. And when the opponent does break through, Courtois is there. At Benfica on February 17th, Madrid didn't start well. Benfica came out sharp, and Courtois had important moments in those early minutes. But Madrid didn't panic. They absorbed the pressure, stayed compact, and then, when the moment came, Vinícius scored the winner. Then the match was halted for 11 minutes. Racist abuse directed at Vinícius. High emotion, a crowd turned hostile, and Madrid still held their shape, held their nerve, and left Portugal with the advantage. That's the hidden upgrade, not just tactical discipline. And those two things, right now, are working together. Here's what separates this from a typical new manager bounce. The same patterns keep showing up across different games, against different opponents. Under different pressures, the right side delivery through Trent, the early vertical access for Vinícius, the Valverde coverage layer protecting transitions. Arda Güler is finding his footing too, not in flashy ways, but in decisive ones. His corner delivery against Levante, headed in by Asensio to seal a tense win. That's a player understanding his role in a stable system. On the left, Álvaro Carreras has emerged as Arbeloa's established fullback, the carrier and defensive anchor that balances Trent's creative aggression on the right side. The asymmetry is deliberate. And it works. The stars look freer, not because the system asks less of them, but because it places them into better situations more consistently. And that's ultimately what Arbeloa has built in a matter of weeks. Not a revolution, just clarity, repeated, reinforced, and now starting to look automatic. That's the dangerous part. Madrid aren't just winning again, they're learning to win through chaos. The emotional temperature is stable, the roles are clear, the squad feels synchronized, and the system? It's not even fully automated yet. If this is Arbeloa's Real Madrid after just weeks, imagine what it looks like after months.